When you start a business, it's very important to really have a mission, a vision, and really stick to staying humble along the way. We talked to one of the co-founders of InHouse Creative today, Zach, about how he was able to create this business, create a creative marketing agency right here in Toronto, all with not really having a background technically within the field. Taking these outside knowledges, coming together with a strong team, developing a business from the ground up, they've been able to see extreme success in a short amount of time with a relatively small team. And really, we can go over some of the keys to this. What's really apparent throughout this whole conversation on this podcast is the importance of building relationships. How work, when you love it, is really 24/7, and anything you can do to really help you get ahead is extremely important. But one of the most important things that became very apparent is the ability to stay humble, talk to everyone, and really have those long form conversations to really understand that at the end of the day, you'll know where relationships will take you, but also it's very effective for building a customer base. On this episode, we go over the creation of InHouse Creative, how he was able to really develop the business but also grow along the way, as well as some of the challenges they faced, and really how he was able to persevere and grow even when times seemed tough. We talk about obviously the importance of really figuring out the product market fit and being able to have really good customers, as well as at the end of the day, learning how you can really get profitable and run a business. No matter how great your idea is, if you can't make money, you can't pay the bills, there's no business there. Hopefully you guys enjoy this episode, learn a bit more about the whole world of creative agencies, and check out Zach and really the projects he's working on to really reinvent really what it means to be an agency and really grow from a small company to many years being one of the larger ones in this field. Hopefully you guys enjoy.
My name is Zach. I am the co-founder of InHouse Creative. We are looking to build an agency that challenges the ways that agencies and teams work together. We call ourselves in-house because we work so closely with our clients in terms of goal sharing, communication, and overall, I guess, work methodology that we call ourselves in-house. We are really this agency where it's not so much of write a check for us and then talk to us in 2 weeks. And we're always striving at our best to teach our clients the most that we possibly can and to be that team members. I know that one of the biggest reasons why sometimes companies don't want to work and hire an agency is they want someone in house. Well, we're gearing up and changing our methods and our methodology to be in house for them. And we've been working around for 3 years. We're absolutely having a blast. I love every second of what I'm doing. I love my clients. I love the people that don't even work with us because they even consider us in the first place. And that's super special to us. And I'm very grateful to be, I guess, on your show and for you to take notice on what we're doing. So that's very special to me as well.
Sure. And one thing with creative agencies, I think this, I mean, my side being obviously business focused, or working with a lot of businesses on like the sales side. And I guess sometimes the creative process can have a, I don't say negative view, but like a misinterpretation with the
Mhm,
creative side. So I feel like a lot of people maybe misinterpret or are unsure like what a creative agency does.
mhm.
Is it like what is a creative agency? And like why
Sure.
would someone come to you? Because I think
Mhm.
sometimes people assume it's like, hey, we have a idea, create everything for us, where others may not really understand like what the role of a agency is versus like how prepared they have to be before even coming to you to help work with
Sure.
them.
So years ago, it's actually funny because like this is something that I've learned very recently, and like there's two ways of doing it. There's like, hey, we'll shoot a video and it's gonna look awesome and it's gonna get to your customer base, and like, or like you could say to us like, hey, we've got a project. We're becoming a creative agency that are essentially grabbing our clients and being like, okay, if you don't have a KPI for this project, there's no way that there's no point of us even working together. So that kind of differentiates ourselves in the long run because usually creative is art. Yes, there's that art to it, and there's that heart to it as well in that aspect. And
Mhm.
we work with a lot of artists, we work with a lot of different contractors and animators and skills and stuff like that, and that's fine, and they do their thing. But there's never any measurement of KPIs. So I think a lot of people are sketched out and like creative because it's like, yeah, they're creative, but like, how are they actually measuring money? It's so hard to track it. So we've really mastered the ability to be like, how are you tracking your KPIs if they're sending us to Texas for an event video, right?
Mhm.
And or let's say we have an amazing fintech commercial coming out in the next month. How are you tracking your KPIs? It's a win-win situation for everyone. We're able to brag and we're able to share our wins. And also too, like at the end of the day, like it's not so much of a creative agency anymore because now the client can be like, they actually boosted my revenue by 300% or got us more engagement by 300%. So I understand what you're saying. A creative agency is that kind of art and direction in terms of the creative
Mhm.
side, but we have kind of learned to reroute that and master it in a different way of thinking to make our clients want to, I guess, work with us a little bit more.
Mhm. And I mean, like what you touched made a lot of sense. Like having KPIs, understanding. I think that's a classic thing for anything. Is like, how does this help me make money? And I think with the use of technology, that's as silly as it sounds, like 20 years ago, it was a lot harder to be like, hey, I did this campaign or we're doing this. What were the end results and how we're tracking revenue? Before it was a little bit of a hope, a little bit of just making up numbers. But now, like you said, much easier to track or at least have a better idea where the money is going and the results that come with it. When, I guess, like anything else, obviously when you were starting out, it's almost like you're figuring out your place. You're kind of accepting all clients nowadays because you're pretty well established. You're relatively well known. What are some of the, like the key things to make I guess a good customer or a better relationship? Like what do they have to tend to
Hmm.
come with, or like what are some of the, I guess, that question, but also like what are some of the misconceptions, I guess, when people expect you to do that you really don't focus on?
Um, I guess I would kind of say it like this. Obviously, as I've grown, like, and I guess the analogy I always use is like at the beginning, I was trying to catch whatever fish I could because they were
Mhm,
feeding our family and they were feeding our company's family. But now it's more so we have more accesses to the fishes, I guess, in the sea. And I'm able to scoop our hand up and collect us more and have us more opportunities. But I've also been I also like to throw it back at the beginning too, and pretend for a second, like, let's say I was that little, that guy starting out at the beginning. People in a way are like trees, in a sense, sorry, like branches, and they lead to other branches and other opportunities. I look at assessment on a couple of different ways in terms of projects that I want,
mhm,
and sometimes it's not always cash. Like, cash is not always the one thing that we're looking at the end of the day. Is it going to make us look good? Is it the right thing to do? Does it align with our agency drives? Do we like
mhm,
the person? So we work with a lot of food companies, and like, you think they can afford us? Like, no, but we still do a lot of that work pro bono because it feels
mhm,
good. I think that we have to vibe with the energy of the client that we're saying. There's obviously that respect factor in terms of let them do what they're doing and kind of
mhm,
respecting us and kind of welcoming us there into their company in a way. But in terms of turning people down, I mean, I've always tried my best either to obviously if there's no to fit, then there's no fit.
mhm,
And if there's that vibe, that sucks. But I'd always try my best to either refer them to a contractor that's either better at their budget or a better at
mhm,
their fit, B, trying to send them down the ladder to find them to get their problem solved. There are three different types of people you come across for, but we don't like to worry about the fourth one. Everyone
mhm,
can be like this for you. They're your buyers, so the people, your purchasers that purchase stuff from you. So are we purchasers? No. That's fine. That's totally cool. They're your elevators, the people that want to help you get better and want to essentially refer your name and bring you out to other people. So hopefully you'll do that for me and our agency, and I'll do
mhm.
that for you as well. And then there's the people that advocate on behalf for you. So just understanding that, like, in a way, all your business contacts can be allies in a way puts you on a different level. There's no such thing as enemies, competitors, even competitors. There are no such thing as
Mhm.
enemies.
For sure. And I think that's really insightful here because I think a lot of times people, it's very challenging, very difficult to figure out like how to grow a business is realizing like every touch point is a way of helping, helping and growing. It doesn't have to just be a customer. It can just be a relationship or at least having that
Mm-hmm.
stronger connection can bring a lot more down the line. They always say, I mean, since you're young, there was like, connections are the most important thing. And that's all
Mm-hmm.
that's so important. You don't realize that until it comes in handy. You're like, oh, wow, this connection thing is super useful. That's why getting a
Mm-hmm.
name out there is so important, really growing, even whether it be a business or in your personal life. It's so important along
Mm-hmm.
the way.
Yeah.
What one interesting thing is obviously like you've been growing this and creating this, but how did it start? Like, were you a photographer when you were younger, and you're like, hey, I like business, I want to become a creative agency? Was it something you kind of fell into? Because right,
Yeah.
obviously, a lot of this can be done internally as well. So, like, what was there between you kind of going from the entrepreneurship route rather than working for a larger company, kind of running or helping
Sure.
run their creative?
Sure. I think there are people, like, based on like, there are different types of people in the world
Mhm,
based on what them. A lot of the time I'm in the car, and I say to myself, like, I could never be an employee. Like, it's just not the
mhm,
way I am. I am thinking about work 24/7, and it's not like an unhealthy mentality of it. Like, I really genuinely true
mhm,
love thinking about it and thinking about plays. I worked for somebody for 3 days, like, literally. I
yeah,
was trying to get a job. This guy, like, allowed me, and in that space, he kind of belittled me. He kind of said, you don't know about revenue. You don't know anything about
mhm,
this. Like, he said some pretty stupid shit. I'm not gonna lie.
mhm,
And I felt at the point where it's like, I already know so much more about building relationships with this guy. Like, why not go and do it? He was in video
yeah,
production. whatever. Like, do I actually have beef with him? Like, no, I honestly probably would go out for lunch with him, and talk to him. I'm not like a vindictive type of person.
Mhm,
And I realized that, how long are we on this earth for? Like 80 years if we're lucky,
mhm,
right? 90 years if we're lucky. I'm 26 years old. I want to spend every single second of what I do building it for myself and my co-founders and my team, the
mhm,
people that entrusted with me. And I was lucky enough to do that. I mean, I was staying in my parents' basement, so like, they weren't charging me rent, thank God.
mhm,
I didn't really necessarily like go out to bars. I wasn't really drinking. I wasn't that type of person. I did enjoy video games, and that was probably my
mhm,
vice. But I did realize that like I wanted to do it for myself. No one wanted to hire me, so the first thing I did was find someone, at the beginning of it, while I was still looking, and understanding that I can still kind of maybe learn from someone else, like just basically
mhm.
finding someone that does videos and put them together with someone that needs a video. But I also realized at the very early, like 3 months later from doing that, like we're working for the mayor of Toronto through another
Mhm.
company, another partner that we had. So why not stop going, right?
Yeah. And I think that's so true. I think it's one of those things where everyone always expects like the entrepreneurship to be like a spark in your head. I think we talked about this a little
Yeah,
before we started. Is like, you woke up one day and like everything came together and it's a beautiful idea and you just left, you left your room and created $1 million. But that's I don't think that's it. May has happened
yeah,
once or twice, but it's very unlikely. Like you said, it's very much like a journey of like, hey, realization that maybe I can do this for myself. Let's kind of start the
hmm.
process. And starting out is never that simple. It's always a little bit challenging, and there's obviously always doubt when you start.
Well,
Were
depends
you?
how you.
Yeah,
Sorry, do you mind if I just jump in there? It depends
yeah,
how you
jump in.
tackle it. Like one of the things I say to all my clients, like just get started. Like commit to a small thing.
Mhm,
I feel like in marketing, like I understand, I get it. Like it takes months and months. Like I believe me, we've worked with big budgets and we worked with big goals, and it's like make sure everything's perfect on launch. But if you put that mentality in terms of some of the most important things, whether it's going home and buying or reading a book about real estate, if you want to get into real estate, or
mhm,
starting your LinkedIn content, or doing every the hell you want, like you kind of miss out. So definitely like just go out there and win. Like I really go with my gut with a lot of the stuff
mhm.
that I'm making, and I love that.
And so, I mean, you obviously create content as well. Were you like, obviously, there were some skills required to kind of get into this field or some interest. Were you like 10 years old, mowing lawns,
Mm,
doing work to try like being an entrepreneur? I mean, that's a typical story. Or, I mean, how did your journey start? Because obviously you
sure,
probably had some experience or some knowledge of like, hey, I can be my own business. Like this is a option for me. Was this starting at a young age, or was it something where you're like, hey, you know what? Like this whole rat race of life, why don't I just do it for
sure.
myself? Or kind of how did that idea of being an entrepreneur start? Was it something from a young age, or was it something you just realized when you were looking for jobs and you're like, I can do this better. Why do I need someone else
Sure.
at this point?
Um, I had this misconception again in school that like life, and it was the worst thing ever. If there's one thing I could
Mhm,
go back and like tell my younger self, that like life doesn't work the way you think it's going to work. I
mhm,
feel like that we think that we go to our undergrad, and then we do our master, then we do our senior, and then we do our master's. Like if you look at life in a sense of like someone else telling you you're ready to graduate, you're gonna kind
mhm,
of sit there for a long time as opposed to start working on yourself now. It wasn't necessarily me so much of me wanting to be an entrepreneur. I know I always wanted to do it, but I really started to take school very seriously during the end of my time there, and I thought,
mhm,
wow, I'm in college, like, and I did marketing and I really enjoyed it. But then I thought like no one else really cares as much as I do. Like maybe I should go to university, and then I went to university and there was like 500 people in a room who really didn't care. And then I thought, oh, I'll go to law school and like that will be my life. But then I realized
mhm,
that there were people in my network who were making twice as much as lawyers and spending 5 times as much more with their families. So I don't know, man. Like what I'm doing here with InHouse is I'm building an agency where I can look and say, Brandon, in the next couple of years, I like your business. I'm going to take 30% equity in it. We're going to handle all your marketing from your campaigns to making your website. I'm basically going to give you service of what it would cost
mhm,
you, to, $100,000, $150,000, and we're going to do business together, a partner. I'm not necessarily building this to pay my bills. I'm building something that I can build a wheel so I can
mhm,
jump into other businesses and get involved with them and really enjoy my quality, my drive, which is building something that's bigger than myself. And like, man, it's like the people that I've met so far on this journey. Shout out to Ben Pfefferman. It all started with him. He was the one guy to give me a chance. The people that you meet on this journey, it does not stop here. Like, and it's just like so beautiful, man. Like I met you, and it's like I know you now, man. Our lives crossed. Like that's really special to me. So it's not so much of like monetizing it. Like obviously we got to eat, and I do want a beautiful
mhm,
cottage one day, but it's like it drives me when you get to meet these people, these really
mhm.
special people that I've come across. Really, really special people.
And it's like you say, it's such an interesting journey. And I think that's one thing that's always a misconception every time even you talk to entrepreneurs or you talk about their story, especially while they're going through it. Everyone's story is different, but in some ways the same, as in the sense that they had no idea what was going on. They were just like, I enjoy this. Let me like obviously work
Mm-hmm.
hard, go through with it. But looking back, they were never like, oh, when I was 10 years old, this is where I wrote my master plan and I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always challenging as anyone looking to start a business. There's always that fear to jump in, or like a lot of times, I talk to people who have very successful businesses. They never thought they were an entrepreneur or wanted to start a business. It was just something that there was effort to do it, but it was one of those things where it's like not they didn't self-identify at the time until they realized it was a passion. So it's almost like very passion driven that gets these entrepreneurs, gets people to start a business and really create from there. It's rarely the other way of like, how can I make a $7 billion by age I'm 22?
Yeah.
It's never that, it seems.
If
It's
you
always
chase
like, oh,
money, I just don't think you get it early on. Yeah.
it's always wild. Like in that you said, it's very hard to chase the money and be successful. Obviously, it happens for some, but it's
Mm-hmm.
typically the other way around. You have a passion, and the money comes once you become the best at your field, or really grow from
Yeah.
there.
So
So,
I
mhm.
listen. Sorry, do you mind? Sure.
Yeah,
Is this like
yeah,
a yeah?
yeah.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and for anyone that's listening out that's starting their business, even if you're 45, even if like it doesn't matter how old you are, I listen to these podcasts of these other agency owners, and like I'll be honest with you, man, like I haven't figured it out yet. Like we've made
Mhm,
money for this month, and we've made money for next month, and I don't know about the next month after that, but we're
mhm.
gonna do our best to double down and continue surviving. I am not a millionaire. I am not close to it. All I'm doing is just enjoying the ride and doing what I'm doing, and I listen to these podcasts of these guys, and they talk about how they're selling their agencies for like 15 mil, and their monthly retainers are like upwards of like 60, 70K and stuff. Like, you know what, good for them, I love them. And the one thing I used to be mad, why am I not them? And then it's like you realize like these people are like 34 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old. So like you need to kind of get back into the mentality that you're exactly where you need to be and love these moments and take the knowledge from it. Would I like to make 70K a month? Would I love my, yes, 100%. Is it going to happen today? No, but it's also just understanding that like maybe if I was 10 years older and been doing this already, I would be there. But you got to take your failures. You got to fall gracefully. I don't know if you play Dark Souls or any of those video games, but I'm addicted to them for
Yeah.
the mere fact because you fail and you keep getting up. And yeah, that's what I would say. It's just
Mhm.
you have to stay consistent. And it's kind of like if you quit smoking, right? If you smoke a cigarette again, it's just going to restart the whole process.
What you touched on there is quite interesting, because I think one of the misconceptions is that like it is a short or quick, like success is very fast. They always say it's like overnight success is like 10 years of working to get to that point, and it's the
Yeah.
same thing. Like when you it's always hard to compare yourself because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I think a very popular, podcast with Mr. Beast, the classic,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
especially depending on your age, you know who he is or you don't know who he is, or everyone kind of knows who he is
Hmm.
now because of some of the Squid Game videos. But on Joe Rogan's podcast, he talks about how he started when he was 12. So by the time he was
Hmm.
22, he had 10 years of operating
Hmm.
at the highest level, understanding this and working at, like, not going to school pretty much to do it. So from the outside, you're like, oh, this 24-year-old kid making millions.
So
Look at all the
successful.
luck.
Yeah.
It's all, yeah, all
Well,
this luck, like
yeah.
just because he's YouTube. But then you look back at it and you're like, okay, well, if I spent 10 years of my life, obviously you can't recreate his success, but you'd probably be
Hmm.
successful almost doing anything if you spend 10 years of your life dedicated to something. I think that, like what you touched on, is very important, is that
Hmm.
you have to realize that where you are in your journey is probably where you're supposed to be, but also you have to be humbled by it. Because
Hmm.
I remember, I think everyone's gone through this. You look at your friends who are more successful than you're like, damn, like, I'm smarter. I should be better than them. Like, what? Why are they all lucky? And then if you actually sit down and talk to them, half the time you're like, oh, you've been doing this for like 5 years.
Hmm.
You go home after
Yeah.
work, you work on this. I always say it's very hard to meet dumb, successful people because they're very good at what they do typically, and they're smart at what they do. Now, smart can be
Hmm.
depending on kind of where you're focusing, but it's success is very rarely ever luck based. So I like how you
Hmm.
touched on that, like really realizing like, hey, I know where I want to go, but you have to enjoy it and kind of work through that
Yeah.
journey to get there, uh,
Yeah.
as a
And not getting too
process.
crazy with it too. It's just like, hey man, like we're not working together anymore. Like now I make $5,000, and like that's
Yeah.
not the mentality. Like like I'm telling you, like if you like you have to have, I don't know whether you're born with it or whether I
Mhm.
learned it or whatever, but like I'm very bullish in terms of treating people respectfully, making sure the intern of the company feels as respected as my partner. Nerlin, shout out to Nerlin. I love him as well too. But just making sure people feel heard, respected. There are those tough situations in business too, and I'm not gonna like sit here and be like, oh, I'm the king of relationships. I know
Mhm.
everything. Where like you don't want to deal with somebody because the numbers don't make sense. So like, do you do it in a dick way or do you do it like how do
Yeah.
you do it, right? Like I don't have the answers, but I do know that like when it comes back again to the journey, um, the one thing I do for anyone that's listening, and again, I haven't figured it out. All I've done is for the last 3 months stick to something, and I really be able to grow my company.
Mhm.
What I would say is like get started now, whatever it is, experiment, talk to people, and the moment you like start doubting yourself, like you really fuck up really badly. Um, there's not like you really need to. You have a voice, God, like I can't believe I said that. You have a voice, like use it.
Oh, for sure. And I think what you touch on, like the idea of having respect running a team is so important because I think it's one of
Mm,
those things where you don't know firstly like managing employees is so important, but also that you don't like you said, you don't know where your journey goes and being friendly. So many times you hear stories of like, yeah, I met this person 5 years ago. Now they're my
yes,
co-founder or now they're my lead
yes,
investor. And you're like, I would have they were just like someone pastly, they weren't successful at the time, but just being nice always helps out. And I think that
yeah.
is where you see the dividends over time, just being a friendly person or at least nice can always seems to pay dividends. It just might take a little bit longer because you're like, oh, I'm talking to all these
Yeah.
people. What's going to happen? And overnight, you're like, oh,
Well,
bam, great
but I think
connections.
you know what, like that's actually kind of like I'm very excited and very optimistic, like where we go in like business development, because that does fall into it. Like being understanding that, like, yo, you might be my client, you might not be, but like, am I gonna force you? Am I gonna send you 3 emails a week to follow up on
Yeah.
actions? No, all I'm gonna do is try and teach you something new. You'll remember me. We'll be in touch, and when the time is right, the time is right. I'm so excited for business development to start acting like that, where people are becoming experts in their field, not like sneakily trying to make sales and close deals and create value where it's like, oh man, you got to do this deal with me this week, or it's not
Mhm,
like I'm so excited for our generation to become more of the
mhm.
decision makers because the cold calling thing less and less, like it's not working. I really don't think
Yeah.
it's working for our generation. I don't know, but I should talk it with facts, but I just have a feeling it's not working because at least for my network of friends and us, like we don't have time for it at all. Like we don't even take them.
Yeah. I've done cold calling myself. It, I've actually seen mixed results with it, but it is one of those things generationally where it has changed. It's a lot harder to have that in ungenuine conversation with people because people just look you up and Google you, and you're like, okay, well, this is a liar. Oh, I'll just book online. Like I think that's like it's like you
Yeah,
said, how we ingest content and how we grow with people is kind of changing as the years go by. And
and buyers
how
want to
they,
do their own
yeah,
research. Sorry, yeah.
it's so much, yeah, like you said, it's so much research driven. I think that's also kind of coming back to this is like why having creative is so important. We've
Hmm.
seen businesses like almost have no sales teams and have crazy sales because they realize that users want to make their own decisions and having as like good quality content or and good quality understanding of who your customers are is can be make or break. You like you said, we've seen billion-dollar companies never have a sales team and
Hmm.
be like, hey, people just find us. And I think that's 20 years ago would never be possible because how would unless you had like $1 trillion in marketing, like now with a lot more as hate this word and you probably dislike this word as well possibly is like viral campaigns.
Hmm.
You can depend very little to get to great impact if you are genuine with your product and kind of what you're trying to sell
Hmm.
and show. I
Yeah.
guess from that, what when you hear viral, what are your opinions of the word viral? Because I always talk to different and it's like people hate it or they're like it's just misinterpreted. It's kind of buzzword. Like when someone
Yeah.
have people come to you and say we want a viral content. Like, is that
For
common
me,
still, or is that
like
like
yes, they have, but they also have to understand that like the moment, and I'm finding this like I don't know if it's like a secret restaurant that I shouldn't be telling people about because
Mhm,
I want to capitalize on this. But if you're looking for the word viral, right? Like at least the way the terminology that I'm doing, because you can make it very serious or very fun, right? Like there could be a
yeah,
very serious, powerful ad. The moment you're doing this all for money and not to change, like the moment where it's like we want to increase sales, like yes, those are conversations that takes place. Like we got to eat, we need money in the
mhm,
pocket, right? Like we got to eat. That's fine. That makes sense. But the moment where it becomes so fixed on just becoming viral just to fucking put some money in your pocket, you fail every time. It happens
mhm,
with community marketing. 99% of the marketing. That's part of the in-house team. Like we want to have fun with our clients and we want to make them understand that like what we're creating for in certain cases can be fun. So and then also too the viral is like we had a client an article. Sorry, they got featured in Narcity last month. I'm going to do a video about that. They got 300,000 views, basically. Like,
Hmm.
that's considered viral, but like, were they on Joe Rogan's podcast? Like, no. So viral is like a different scale. Maybe there's a new restaurant that just opened up in Yonge and Eglinton. They went
Hmm.
viral. So virality is a scale. Um,
Hmm.
but I will say the most important thing that I said is like, you want virality, like you can't be doing it backed by money, and you can't be chasing money after, or you're not going to win. Like you want to make people feel like, if you're in the mental health space, I don't think your tone of your company is going to be so much of a humoristic aspect of it. But if you want people to feel something, damn well, if I was working with you guys, like the
Hmm.
leadership team and us, like we're not kind of just doing this in terms of like, well, we want to put her here because
Hmm.
showing her that she's in university, because that's going to like, we have to make it so it makes sense and it's the right thing to do. Does that answer your question, or was that kind of
Yeah,
like
no,
confusing?
that's great. I think like what you touched on is like I think one of the things we've seen over the past 5 years, especially with like marketing or even developing content, is people realizing that like you can't just make something viral. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea for virality is that it's like a huge explosion out of nowhere. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of those things now where people are realizing like, hey, and we see this with other companies, like their brand has to match their product and their like messaging has to match. And I think we haven't seen a lot of that in the past, but now it's so important. Like, a company I think has crazy good growth for such a personally weird products like Liquid Death, a water
No, they're
company
sick.
that I think
They're
worth
sick.
like $100 million. Like that's one of those things where you're like, oh, you tell any investor like 10 years ago, I'm gonna make a water company in a can, and we want to raise like $5 million. They'd be like, what are you talking about? But
Yeah.
now they're like their marketing's on point. Like they're very embodied in that whole branding idea, and kind of what they are is very consistent. I guess consistency is king. I think that's what you touched on as well, as like your tone should match. You can't just make a funny video if you're serious, or something very serious if it doesn't really match what you are intending to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, space is booming, a lot of growth, and I mean, even past, like you said, a few years, your projects are growing, your team's growing. How big are you currently? How big's your team?
Sure. So we've got three people full time. That's
Hmm.
myself. We're actually going to start be opening up, looking for some new roles as well. But I want to
Hmm.
get some more people on the business development side. But I am all BD. I create content. I rarely do outreach anymore, which I'm so proud of.
Hmm.
I like to bring people in towards me, into what we do. So I'm the first person. I co-founded it with my partner Nerlin, who is like the head of creative. And then we have a new founder that we brought on board, or a
Hmm.
partner that we brought on board, I think around a year and a half ago, named Evan, who does a lot of the actual creative stuff as well too, the project management, creative balance. Then we've got Alexi, who's our like web development guy. We've got like, I would say three, and then like six people that we like pull from if we need them. So
Hmm.
web development, animators, copies, and such. We're a small agency. I know we're gonna have to make that jump. One of the things that we like, necessarily that we're really focused on is like, I've read that like, an employee's success at a company is based on whether they're onboarded properly. So we're spending a ton of time thinking about like building things out now so we can be ready to pull the trigger. So onboarding packages for our actual team.
Hmm.
What do their day to day look like? Like things look like. What are their responsibilities? But at the end of the day, too, like I mean, we're 3 years in. We're profitable, which is nice. We're taking home money in our pockets. We're feeding our
Hmm.
families, and we're gonna now it's time to kind of shift gears and like think about more of a thrive mindset,
Yeah.
and less of a survivability. But I would say we're a team of like under 10 people basically on
Hmm.
most projects, and I think it's a sweet spot number. I guess the one thing I also want to say is like, I know a lot of agencies that look at their clients more so as like the budget that they have and what they bring to the table, and like I really want to make sure that we grow slowly and yet thoughtful, so we don't become this agency that's just like chasing cash. That was one of
Yeah.
the things that was very important to me. So I'm taking it very slowly on how we're going to do that. And who do I want to think to bring that over?
And I think it's so important. Like when growing a team, it's like it always sounds silly, but it's so true. Like the people you bring on are so important to the future success of the
Yeah,
business.
yeah,
Like it always sounded silly. I mean, early on in my career, I'm like, what do you mean the people like obviously people matter, but like
hmm,
how important it is for setting culture. And I always thought culture was like a fluffy thing that wasn't real. I guess being going to business school so many times, you're like money, money, money. What is
yeah,
culture? But now realizing like, hey, having the right culture and the right fit is so important for growing a team.
hmm,
One thing I'm always interested in, especially with you having a few other founders kind of working with a smaller team, how do like how do you resolve issues? 'Cause I'm assuming you all had different
yeah.
experience, you have different views. How does
Sure,
that like process happen?
sure,
Because I'm always interested
sure.
in hearing, and that's a
Yeah, man.
such an
Yeah,
important thing of founding.
sure. I think the most magical thing my partner said to me, Evan,
Mhm.
he said to me, "We don't hate people in this company. we hate ideas.
Mhm.
But it's more so in the sense of like separating people from the idea, because it's very easily, if I say something that like constantly like we should do this, we should do that, like we should do that, like step away from what the person's saying, because you build a relationship with them, right? There are things that my partners love that I've done, moves that I've made in business that they love, they clap for me, they
Mhm.
have my back. And then there's also moves that like have significantly kind of pissed them off, like where I
Mhm.
wasn't paying attention necessarily to the brief, I signed a bad deal here, I made us look bad there, and vice versa. I'm sure there's things that they've done that
Mhm.
piss me off too. But the moment you start to combine a person with an idea, you fuck up. You're failing, because now I'm judging
Mhm.
Evan as who he am as a person, less more so critiquing his brilliant ideas and some of his shitty ideas as well. Same with Nerland. Like, it's separating the person from the idea, because that's really what it is. Hey, this isn't going to work, Zach, because X, Y, and Z. Not, Zach, you have to calm down. You're always fucking doing this. You're always running,
Mhm.
like grabbing all the deals. You're grabbing us bad deals. Like, it's not working, right? Like, so that's like, I guess, the money thing in terms of how we're solving problems. Also, too, like understanding that like nobody gave us anything. Like, we
Mhm.
did all this. I haven't expanded my team yet. I don't have 15 people that are on the team full time that I'm responsible for. All I got are my partners. They got equity in the business. But the one thing that like shocks us, you have to pinch yourself, is like no one gave us anything. And we worked with Maple and Acto, which are like
Yeah.
some of the biggest titans in life sciences and healthcare. Even to be
Mhm.
speaking to you right now at the company that you work at.
Mhm.
4 years ago, when I was looking for an internship, why should I be here? So being very
Mhm.
humble and understanding where you are and thankful for it. Not like, yo, Brandon, let's go play some golf, after the
Mhm.
game. Like, I'll show you what's good and how's creative way. But being thankful that you've even taken the time to speak to me, and the clients, again, like the ones that work for us and the ones that don't, I love them both. But
Mhm.
that mentality that I'm really trying to install into my company for as long as I have remain control of
Mhm. And what you touched on is so important is the idea that you have to really view ideas as ideas separate from people, and especially with a
it. Yeah.
smaller team, it's hard because you obviously trust them, you like them, and you're like, hey, like this is a bad idea, and it's like getting to that point where it's you're not hurting each other's feelings, you're really just criticizing the idea and knowing
Yeah.
like, hey, I respect you, but from
It's
my
God
view,
tier.
this is just a shit idea, and it's
God
being
tier.
able to say that. I think that's one thing I found in very successful small teams is like the ability to tell the truth quickly and no one getting. I mean, obviously, I know
Upset.
there might be some offense, but like in the sense like people obviously when you have an idea, you're always attached to it to some extent. But like the idea being like, okay, you know what? Let's hear it out. Let's have like a normal conversation about this, and then at the end, we can both see it from both each other's views and see
Mm-hmm.
was this right? Was this wrong? Were my assumptions wrong? Were your assumptions right? I think that's so
Creating a
important.
space too, man. Like creating a
Yeah.
space where like people are okay to talk, but also like respecting. Like I don't talk shit when like Evan and Nerlin, like they're brilliant creatives, they're brilliant designers. I've learned that it's smarter for me, even though we've built a space where it's okay to say this, to understand that they methodically think about creative in ways that I can't even comprehend, and they've
Mhm.
thought to also respect my view in terms of BD and some of the crazy strategies that I've done. Right, so it goes vice
Yeah.
versa. Like we're in our lanes, we're doing stuff. Yeah, so I love my partners and I love my team.
Yeah. And I think like building the respect is so important, especially when like founding a team, knowing we're all kind of you're all relatively equals in your own lanes to really understand like, hey, let's grow this together. Obviously, past few years been you worked some pretty larger companies. You've really been growing. What were some of the like I guess you'd say easier than starting a business can always be challenging. Were the things that you found easier than you thought, and were there things that were harder than you thought, or you thought, hey, this
Yeah,
won't be a problem, and it was like, oh damn, this isn't as simple as
yeah,
I thought.
yeah. I like a lot of the times when I answer questions like these, I wish I could go back in time and say this. There's this idea that like hustle culture is everything. Like um, like 10, 12 hours, 13 hours a day. And when you lead with that and the work that you do, just because you can feel like you're hardworking and doing that, like you don't get anywhere. My philosophy is that people are people. Some of us sometimes we have our best days, and some we have our small days, and we don't do much.
Mhm.
What I've learned that even on our small days, as long as you do one thing, and that could even be like, hey, Brendan, what's up with you? You want to go for a coffee? Like even that will somehow benefit my business in the future somehow just by building that connection.
Mhm.
That small thing is still going to help. So understanding that like we're human, we got to take our time and our toll to do it. And funnily enough, when you start from instead of being like I have to do a lot first to small and then build up, you actually do more. So there was this like I can't believe I'm like gonna like quote like Jewish scripture here, but like
Mhm.
say a little, do a lot, right? So it's that
Mhm.
kind of like I think that was in the Talmud or whatever, and they
Mhm.
talked about how you do a little bit of things and it makes you even better as you go. So that's kind of been my philosophy, like that hustle
Mhm.
culture, like stay away from it, stay away from that Wolf of Wall Street mentality. It's not real. It's a movie. No one appreciates getting called and trying to like be duped into buying shit. Try
Mhm.
and solve legitimate problems and be a decent person. In the end of the day, like understand that people are people and like there's a way you treat people. I'm not saying you let people walk all over you, but there's definitely a way of treating people that you got to do. So that's something that definitely a life lesson. Um,
Mhm.
don't fall into the assumption that relationships are the most important thing. They're not. They are very important to a degree, but also educate them. Learn faster than your clients are and teach them something new. There's a book called The Challenger Rep. Shout out to
Mhm.
Elliot Cohen. It changed my life. It is one of the reasons it saved my business as well too. And then number three, no matter what, whoever there's no person will ever the only person that's going to be solution to your business is you. So no
Mhm.
person is ever going to solve like no one's ever going to take you up with them. You got to do it yourself. Those are my I guess three things that I would share with my network and my audience.
And what you touched on, it was great about like the toxicity of hustle culture. I always find
Yeah.
this interesting. I think there's a misconception between the idea of like working hard and then working dumb, like just
Hmm.
for no reason. I think one of the things is it feels good to be like, I worked 15 hours, but like, what did you do in those 15 hours? Why did you work in
Yeah.
15 hours? And
Yep.
I spent some time in, obviously different countries. It's very interesting, like how some cultures, like if you work past five, it's
Mhm.
like it's not cool. It's like, why are you so bad at your job you can't finish it before five?
That's
That was
interesting.
eye opening. It's like that was eye opening to me, being like, okay, how efficient am I? But one thing that
Hmm.
always comes up is like the importance of sleep. And
Yes.
I talk everyone you talk to. I mean, not everyone, but like obviously there are sleepless nights. You have to get stuff done. But most successful entrepreneurs I speak to are always about how like, hey, I have to get my some people are like 6, 8 hours. Like I have to get my sleep in.
Yeah.
Don't take any emails, and then I can get my rest. And like rest becomes like what they're all trying to optimize. They're like, how can
Hmm.
I get the most rest as fast as possible? And I think that's one thing that
It's brilliant.
sounds dumb or like sounds weird to be like, okay, focus on getting good night's sleep. But at a certain point, everyone you talk to is very successful for like he's like long many years. It's always the one thing they always say is like rest is so important, especially
Hmm.
if you're creative or like having to do stuff. Like you just need to be able to think
Yeah,
clearly, and
man.
it's so hard to think when you're tired. But that
Yeah,
should
man.
also be misconstrued with the idea of like, hey, every Friday don't work. It's a startup, have fun. Like there obviously is very hard work and hard times and crazy
Yeah.
hours, but like you touched on, like why is working longer seemed is better if we get the
Yeah.
same results? And I think that's a hard thing to
Hmm.
learn, like hard thing to realize when you're like, oh, I'm spending all these hours, but you're like, damn, I was on YouTube for 3 hours today. I was on Spotify. I got set, especially when working from home. You're like, I got 7 lunches. Maybe I wasn't
Yeah.
that productive. I could probably have done this in way less time, but
Yeah. There's
it's
some
always
great programs to
interesting.
help you measure how you spend your
Yeah.
time online. I try to keep off YouTube because I do get distracted, but I think it's just important to remember that at the end of the day, it's more so of how you wish to spend your time and what you want to spend your time on. I also think, like, can I ask you, like, what do you constitute as work, right? Because when I responded to your LinkedIn message, I classified this work. It's going to benefit my
Mhm.
business some way, and like not to be weird or anything like that, but
Yeah.
I was like, I was in the bathtub, like busted out
Yeah.
my phone and got a message. So what constitutes as work? Is that like you sitting at a desk? You can be working, walking in the park, right? You strategize, you become a general of what your trade is, and you
Mhm.
make moves and you make plays with what you're doing. So work is not sitting at a desk 24/7 doing Excel documents. Work
Mhm.
sometimes goes to sleep with you, sometimes it wakes up with you. But when you really fall in love, and I'm really only starting to see this now because I went through a lot of these like shitty things I had to do to build my agency here.
Yeah.
Like when you really, can't. This is the first time I'm ever saying this, but like when you really start loving it, like work does not become this chore anymore. Like I have fun, I get
Yeah.
hyped up, I am interested to talk to my network, I'm interested to produce, right? So that's kind of my play.
Mhm. I think what you touched on is it's almost funny enough, like similar to the whole religious idea in the sense of like, what is religion? Like, do you have to go to a place of worship to consider yourself religious? Same idea with work is like, do you have to sit at a desk? And I found it's almost like you said, I think it's easier sometimes to sit at a desk and say you're working. I think work from home has made people very aware of this. But like I
Yeah.
know people now, which is this is smartest idea, but I always felt guilty doing it, but there was no reason like on a call going for a walk. So you're like getting some exercise, going outside
Why
and
not?
talking. So you're still working, you're talking on the phone,
I
you're
love
being
that,
way more
man.
productive. And it's one of those ideas where you're like, it's like breaking it's the idea of like breaking the mold. It's like the simplest things, but you're like, oh, maybe I should go outside more. Like you said, like finding a balance and enjoying it, but also being like, what why am I doing it this way? What
Yeah.
is work? And I
I
think
love
that's the
that,
idea. Like
man.
work however you want to work. Do
Yeah.
something different. I know people who like you said, taking calls in between things, going for work, and just enjoying the process.
Yeah.
as it's so
Yeah.
important.
Drop some knowledge on me. Tell me you've been to business schools. You've been. What
Mhm.
episode am I? Am I episode number what?
You're like,
What
I think
person am I?
40, 40. You're 40,
Bruh,
so you're number
like drop
40.
some knowledge on me. Like I want you to before we end it up,
Mhm,
I want you to like share something with me and teach me something.
mhm.
Maybe relatable to some of the stuff that I've been saying, but drop some knowledge, please. I'd love you to tell me your top 3 things that you've learned by doing this and what these impactful things were that they said.
I think, funny enough, I think one of the top three is always hard, but I think one of the most important things is developing yourself as a brand, because people businesses are always, no matter how faceless businesses are, it's always people running them. So developing you as a brand is probably the most important thing, because as we've seen, like your first business may or may not be successful, your second may or not be successful, but the thing that's connecting them all is you. So I found a
Hmm.
lot of these
Love
successful
that.
people, they are heavily involved in building a community for themselves. So when they have a great idea, they can call up a VC or call up, if they need funding, call up funding, or they can find a co-founder. I think that's one thing we talked about this a bit earlier, is like start now, even if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I had one person who was they do like biohacking. So she realized she wanted to do this. So she started her Instagram in year one of university. So by the time she graduated, she had a network of 20,000 people who listened to her and understood her
Insane.
content. So I think the
Amazing.
idea is, number one is like create or just build a brand for yourself. Even if you hate talking on camera, hate talking, I think that was like the most important thing. Um, Secondly, you kind of touched on this well, is like enjoying the process, because, and that I always, it's always annoying to hear, but the idea is that like you will never really wake up and feel accomplished if you don't feel accomplished almost every day. There's never a point you wake up and you're like, I finally hit 7-figure
Hmm.
salary. I'm
Yeah.
happy.
No, it
Because
never
you're going to meet
happens.
someone
Yeah.
who's making twice as much as you. And I remember talking to
Yeah.
like some people who like worth hundreds of millions, and they thought they made it till they talked to someone and they were like, oh yeah, I spent 100 million on a boat. And they're like, I spent 40 years building this. And this guy
Yeah.
spent the same thing on a boat, and they feel miserable. So there's always people who
Yeah.
are richer and more successful than you. So you just have to enjoy it. And then third, this is, I think, going outside is probably the most
Yes.
important thing, because I think the idea of going, it's very hard first, like you said, it's hard to a little bit to work. You can always work outside, but I've never probably met someone in my life who doesn't have free time some part in their day. Like you said,
Hmm.
no one's you're never 100% efficient. So the biggest skill I found in a lot of people is finding out how to shut it off. And like I always say, like one thing I want to learn is how to take the most aggressive breaks possible. Like,
Ooh,
how
I
can you
love
go
that.
from
I
like
love that.
working to
Bruh,
zero instantly?
I'm going on a canoe trip. Like I don't you
Yeah,
go on camping trips?
I've got more into camping now in my
Yeah.
later 20s, just like to disconnect,
Oh,
because
bro, man, like it's like I live for it, man. I go
it's
for a walk. I'm
it's
taking a walk
so
after I'm
different.
done. Like it's
Mhm.
yeah.
I think
Yeah, you like
that's
Star
one thing.
Wars?
Not Star Wars, but
Oh.
speaking of relaxing, this is a kind of a funny aside. Speaking of video games, it's like I used to watch a lot of TV and be like, "Oh, I'm taking a break," but video games, they're toxic. Like they're not. That's TV's fine because everyone wants TV, but video games are bad.
Sure.
So I started playing video games again because I found them more relaxing than TV. So my 1 hour free, I'm like, I don't care. I have 1 hour off. I'm gonna play a video game because I enjoy that more than TV, and that's been like my productivity hack, was playing video games, as
What
silly as
games do
it
you play?
sounds. A lot of League of Legends. I went real toxic real fast. So League of Legends, really heavily into it. But yeah, that's like one of those things where I think the idea of like learning how to take breaks and disconnecting is so important, but no one really talks about, because it sounds weird to be like, how can I optimize my breaks? But like
Hmm.
that's the key. And going outside is probably the easiest way of doing it. I was heavily into bonsai trees, so like going outside and gardening
Oh, my
is like,
partner loves that.
I went to Japan for 3 months to work on a bonsai nursery, so, like, it was, like, the best experience of my
Good
life,
for you, man.
but,
Good for
like,
you.
going outside is just eye-opening, because similar to going to the gym, you never typically go outside or go to the gym and regret going. You're like, "That was great, I loved it.
Yeah.
That 1 hour didn't ruin my life," but before you're like, "No, I don't have time for this." So I think those would be my top 3, like, tips from talking to people and also learning from the process, is, like,
Hmm.
there's just a lot you can learn, and a lot of times the like words of wisdom you hear don't click until like they click type thing. It's like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, 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 like I understand, until you're like, oh, I have to enjoy the process,
Yeah.
because it always sounds
Living in the
easy, but until
moment
you do
too.
it,
Yeah.
living in the, it's so important. Like you said with
Yeah.
your business, like enjoying, like work's not work anymore. You can say that your whole life, but until you feel it, you're like, this is what people talk about, like of being passionate. I think for a lot of
Hmm.
people, it's hard to find your passion, but when you do, you kind of know. It's almost like like the true love analogy when it's like you know. And I think that's a lot of times with business is like when you're happy, you know you're happy. You don't have to lie to yourself saying this is kind of what you want
Yeah,
to do with
yeah,
your
yeah.
life.
Hey, before we wrap it up, I want to say the
Mhm.
most special thing about doing it's not about the content I'm creating with you. It's like meeting you. So
Yeah,
thank you so much. Like I really felt the bond with you, and I really felt like we're on the same page a lot of stuff. And thank you for doing this, and thank you for considering me to be on your show, man. It means a lot to me.
mhm,
It makes me feel like I'm at least doing something right.
mhm. Oh, for sure. And it was great to connect and kind of hear your story,
Yeah,
especially with like growing a business through COVID and everything. Kind of like
yeah.
you said, growing everything yourself, being able to be profitable in such a short amount of time. And I think that's one thing where businesses, funny enough, don't
Hmm.
do enough at times. Is like you said, how am I gonna put food on the table? So being able to make money and like take a salary and like live your life is so impressive for a relatively short amount of time because you always hear of things that's like 10 years and still no profit. At one point you're like, damn, this
Yeah.
is getting
10 years is
rough.
a
So I
long
think
time.
it's a long time to go. And I think it's so important of like, hey, how am I gonna make money and get to that process while still building a network
Yeah.
is so important. So I guess before we wrap up here, kind of what does the next like years look for you? Like, is there new expansions, growing your team? Kind of what is like
Sure.
at a high level the kind of next few years look for you and your team?
I don't want to speak on behalf of my team just yet,
Mhm,
just because we're still mulling around with what our plays are.
mhm,
But I can speak to me as an individual. I am 26 years old and I've already felt like I haven't learned enough. So I'm trying to make up for the information and the years that I've wasted not learning. I'm trying to learn more about UX. I'm trying to learn more about demand gen and making that like a thing that's just obsessed with.
mhm,
Just really for like and also being happy, living in the moment. We were at a birthday party. Back in it's not even just about the business. It's a birthday party, and we went back to my buddy's apartment. And like that time
mhm.
goes by so quickly. And my biggest fear is one day I'm just gonna wake up, I'm gonna open my eyes, and I'm gonna be 90, and it's just all gonna
Yeah,
be, you know, yeah, right? Like
for
you get
sure.
sad when you think about that stuff. So it's like really making the most of it. In terms of in-house creative, like we've gone too far to fail. And I'm like I would suck if I like message you asking me for job advice in the next 3 months. So,
Yeah,
but if there is some irony to that, I'll appreciate that as well
yeah,
too. But we've taken too much shit in a way where it's like we'll figure it out. And even if we
mhm,
do have to disband, I don't think we will. I'll make sure that my team's okay because I love them and they love me and we all love each
mhm,
other in a way. And like we'll figure it out. We'll figure out what the next steps are. Right now, like I mean, we've got work for a good amount of time, so we're okay and we're happy. I'm not trying to say that like we're going to be the next billion-dollar agency in the next 10 years. I'm not confident enough to talk about that stuff yet. I'm still learning. I'm still young, but I am working hard and it's paying off. And thank you so much for having me on your show.